Okay. And I'm gonna record like a separate introduction about you, and I'll just do that separately. I always find it weird to be talked about, like if someone's introducing me or talking about me, like it's like kind of uncomfortable to
It's
to
like, how
hear
do
it.
I act? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, yes, I have accomplished all those things. I am this awesome, it's sort of like, so I've learned that it's best to it works best for me to just do it separately. But thank you so much for being here and giving me some of your time. I'm
course.
I'm so excited.
Oh my
And
God.
obviously, I know so much of what you do just from stalking your social media profile. I actually was following you from before I knew that you were working with Nike and that you knew Bettina. It was totally like a coincidence. I think I saw something.
Wow.
Yeah, and I like texted Bettina. I'm like, "Oh my God, do you know Kim in real life?" And she was like, "Yeah,
Wow.
let me introduce you." So, but I was already like following what you do from well before that. So,
Wow. No, that's awesome. I love Bettina. She's so sweet, but I've only met her once, but
yeah.
like the one time I met her, so nice.
Yeah, that's how it is. I feel like with Nike colleagues or partners, because you guys come together for certain things, but a lot of the time you're not living in the same city, right? So,
Ah, true.
yeah, so you're in LA, am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. And are you from LA?
No, I actually moved here from Queens in 2019.
Okay. Oh, okay. So I live in Brooklyn now. Um,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Where to Brooklyn?
I'm in Dumbo. And my son is in school. Well, I have two kids. One is 9 and he's in school in Brooklyn Heights. And
Oh,
then I have a 2-year-old who does a little preschool, but not real school yet. So
wow.
but I'm from California, so we've kind of like swapped places.
Oh, we did. Yeah, no, I'm from Flushing, originally. So yeah.
And you've only just moved to the West Coast a few years ago then?
Yeah, I only moved here in 2019. I'm in Santa Monica now, so
Okay.
it's getting settled.
Yeah, I went to UCLA, so I
Oh,
lived on the West Side for like 10 years.
yeah.
Um well, so tell me about, can I ask you just about how it was to grow up in New York then? What did your childhood look like?
Yeah, I guess my childhood basically looked very chaotic in the best way possible. I often tell my partner who didn't grow up in New York that I learned to take the subway like at the age of like 12 or 13.
It
And he just gets so like stunned about it, but it's something that I don't think twice about. A lot of culture, I because I grew up in Flushing, I didn't really have a lot of white friends. Like most of my friends were Asian, Black people, Hispanic, but like it was really interesting then moving to California. I actually went to Penn State for college, so I went there first, and then being able to just get like it was like an awakening, realizing that most of my classmates were white. Um, but yeah, it was very chaotic in the best way, childhood.
Flushing has a lot of Koreans, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm Korean, and I just remember any Koreans that I met at UCLA that were from the East Coast. I swear they were like all from Flushing. So, um, yeah, but you're Filipino. Your parents are, and your
Yeah.
your parents are from the Philippines. Like they were born and raised there.
Yeah, so me and my parents were both in the Philippines. So I'm an immigrant. I came here when I was one, and then was just like raised in Flushing all my life until I had to go to Penn State. And then yeah, and then moved to LA.
So when you're growing up and you actually had a lot of Asian friends, a lot of diverse friends, then it must have been really different from how I grew up in Northern California, where I was often like the token,
Mhm.
like, and it's not like I was the only Asian person in the school or anything, but sometimes the only Asian person in a given classroom, there was only like a handful of us all the time. And so I was very aware of the fact that I was different. Like it sounds like you wouldn't have really there wasn't one like homogenous kind of race that was like overtaking your classrooms.
No, yeah. So when it came down to like yeah, I never felt like the odd one out. It was kind of like the reverse for me compared to the stories that I've heard from other people, and I'm very grateful to have had that experience of being in a classroom and the outlier was the white kid. Um yeah, it was
Yes.
very interesting. And so then like going to Penn State and then moving here, it was like, wait a minute, like oh my gosh, is this just Flushing or like certain pockets of cities where it is just mostly people of color? I didn't know growing up that like um the white predominant race was white. Very, very interesting.
So, and then, but you're clearly very inspired to be a voice for people of color and for immigrants in particular, right? Like that's really what drew me to your page. And oftentimes that kind of like that interest in being an advocate or activism comes from having had like a painful childhood or having,
Mhm.
and so it's really interesting to hear that actually you didn't come from like having felt left out, but you still landed in this place where you're very interested in being a voice for, right, like for the so-called it's not even the minority. Do you use that term? What's the global majority? Is that the do you use that term now
Oh, I
instead of?
use like melanated or I'll use like marginalized, but the word minority is something that I just never
I
like
know it's
resonated
I
with.
know it's so bad, right? It's
And
like
like
it's
there's an underlying meaning to it that makes it's like literally it's like diminishing. So I'm like, why
yes.
is that what we call each other?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I never know. I feel like the terms are always changing. And somebody
Mhm.
was telling me recently that it's like the global majority something. But basically, like if you look at the whole world, BIPOC is actually the global majority, you know? So,
Yeah.
but what did you study? That was it something you studied in college? What that led you down the path of, what you
Mm.
speak out for now?
Yeah, I think so. I will say, I grew up low income, so I often like joke with my partner. I've like had deep talks with him about like what it means to like be in food scarcity or what it means to like never have your own bedroom growing up, because growing up I shared like an apartment with like six other Filipinos trying to get their green cards. So I don't think I had a conventional childhood that I would see on TV. And I think that was just not, that's something that I've like learned to reckon with as I grew older, like not having your own bedroom. I never really spent time with my parents. They were working all the time. I didn't see my mom really for the first 7 years of being in America. She
Wow.
was a maid and a nanny. And I think as the years have gone by, I felt a lot of resentment about that, just like so much deep-seated anger. Because when I look at the roots as to why I couldn't spend time with my mom or I went hungry, it all has to go deal with like capitalism and the way that immigrants have been treated in this country. And then when like the Asian hate really started to pop off in 2019, I would read the news and I would constantly see either Asian people getting hurt, but really like I remember waking up some days just being in sheer terror that one day it would be my parents.
Mhm.
Um and a lot of it was happening in Flushing. So then I just like made the connections and realized like wow, this is kind of like an FU to like the people who raised me. Um, and so a lot of those deep-seated feelings kind of helped me transition into the space of like, what does it mean to build community in a sustainable way? What does it mean to, as a person of color, like I went through a period 2019 to 2021 where I just hated white people and I
Mhm.
didn't want to be around them. I would like lash out at my partner, he's white, and realizing like that's not the way either. It's not sustainable and it's not the person I want to be. And all of that has led me to like the work I do now.
How did you, my husband's white. We've been together for like 13 years, I think. But
Mm,
you lose count after
yeah.
having after a certain point, and it's like, oh wait, I think it was our anniversary last week. Like we miss all those things now. But and I didn't have the same understanding about like what I really felt about my race when we first met.
Yeah.
Like I was still very much like nobody sees color, we all have equal opportunity in America. And and I totally bought into the model minority myth. Like, oh,
Mm,
Asians are, like, sure, I know they look at us and think we're different, but we're practically white. I like, and I none of this was like conscious, right? Like none of this was
yeah.
how I woke up every day and thought, but
Yeah.
I eventually came to understand that those were the beliefs I held really deeply. And same with you around, for me, I think it really was during the pandemic,
Mm,
when I really started to have the fear that you mentioned, like thinking it's just going to be your parents. um I actually had, so my daughter, the baby, was born in 2020. And if I had to walk somewhere in New York City with my kids and not have my husband with me, I was so scared. I was like, I can't do this by myself. Like if I had to walk more than a mile, I would
mm,
ask like white friends to walk with me, like
yeah.
to walk to the school run when schools reopened during the pandemic. Like for a few months there, I was so terrified. I was like holding pepper spray, like, because I had my baby, like my baby strapped to me. And I just felt so vulnerable. I'm like, I
Yeah.
really understood that we weren't just practically white. We definitely were viewed as different. And my whole long-winded point is, I had this change within the context of our relationship, and my attitude towards him
Mm,
changed too, because he's like a white man.
yep.
and
Yeah.
it wasn't like a personal thing. I obviously didn't I wasn't scared of him. I wasn't blaming him, but the way I talked about white people generally, or racism generally, or Asian hate, like
Mm,
it was really, yeah, there was like an anger and a hostility.
yeah.
And it's, I mean, it still kind of comes up, and he'll kind of make joking statements sometimes where he'll say like, see, not all white people are bad,
Mhm.
or something along those lines. So how did you and your partner, like, how did you move through that? Like, I mean, can you share some stories about when you clashed and
Yeah.
how you are now?
Yeah, and I thank you so much for saying everything you said, because as you were speaking, I was like, no, literally me too.
Yeah.
Like I almost saw my partner as like, I need you. You're like my shield. Um, and it was almost like racist on my end as well to think
Totally.
like this partner will like protect me, or like people passing by will look at me differently because I have a white partner and they won't attack me. There is so many layers to it. So when you were speaking, I was like, no, check, 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 me too. And I think with my partner, it was interesting because he grew up in Maryland. So he grew up in a predominantly white area. And we both had drastically different upbringings. And when all of this was happening in 2019, 2020, really like 2021, like ongoing, um, yeah, we had a lot of discussions, and a lot of it was me explaining to him why us. Like it was me reckoning my Asianness, but it was also me educating him as to why this is so bad. And so he was learning alongside me. And yeah, there were a lot of fights. There was a lot of frustration because he's reckoning his whiteness and I'm reckoning the fact that I I shielded myself with the model minority myth for so long, and there was a lot of guilt with that. Um, his parents are white, and I like did not have the best relationship with them 2021 and onwards because I like lashed out at them for being white, and I would like spot all the microaggressions and I would be like, why are you saying and doing that? And I was purely like in 2021 just angry all the time. I would find reasons to be angry too. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like law of attraction, and it's like
Yeah.
like attracts like, but that's literally how I was festering my racial anger. If I was angry about like white people, I would find every single reason to be angry. And it was to the point where I couldn't leave my house. So like, how is that serving me in the long run? Um, but yeah, today, like I would say it took like what 3 years of just constant conversations, joining support groups. Me and him went to therapy for us to be at a space of like, wow, we are different. Systemically, we are treated differently, but how can we see each other beyond that?
Yeah. I'm remembering actually a big source of my frustration was not being believed.
Yeah.
Like it was just like the first time I tried to talk about it, and I'm just remembering, did you ever hear about that restaurant in New York called Lucky Lee's?
Yeah. Wait, was it
It,
the commercial that they launched or?
they were the ones, maybe it was around their advertising, but it was like opened by like a white influencer Chinese restaurant with like but that was clean Chinese food that wouldn't
Oh
make you
no, I
sick.
never
You
heard of
remember
that
this? Okay. So this was in, I think this was 2018, and it was just
one.
this restaurant that had opened, and the New York Times covered the outrage from the Asian community that this person had opened this restaurant in Soho in Manhattan and was saying like Chinese food, but it won't make you sick. That was her,
Oh
like that was her whole
my
like
God.
tagline or whatever. And the typical like appropriative
Mhm.
decor. And I mean, the restaurant did not survive. But I was so mad when I heard about that. And my husband could see that that was a poor choice on the part of the person who started the restaurant, but he couldn't understand why I felt so personally attacked,
Mhm.
and then I started going like, well, I've always been discriminated against, and
Mhm.
he was like, oh, I've been with you for years, I've never seen you discriminated against. He's like, you're
Yeah.
you're not afraid when you walk down the street past the
Yeah.
police officer. Like, it's not like, like Black people have a reason to feel that, but you're Asian. Nobody And then when the
Mhm.
hate crimes against Asians started hitting the news and everything, he had people at his office because he has a
Mhm.
very diverse team, of staff, and a lot of Asians, or all the Asians, were coming to him and
Mhm.
talking about like exactly what I've been saying, that, oh, now it's more visible. Now this hate against us is more visible, but it's not, this is not unfamiliar to me. I'm not really shocked that this is happening because this has been happening on a micro level always. And it actually really took him hearing from all these other people. And of
Mhm.
course, once it hit the news, like people were like, oh my God, like this is, uh
Mhm.
that's I feel like that really cemented a lot of white people's acceptance of systemic racism and white supremacy. I feel like prior to Asian, especially like Asian elderly being attacked,
Mhm.
prior to then, I think it was easy for a lot of people to also, like white people also, to buy into the model minority myth,
Yeah.
and just because like I know that we are perceived in society very differently to black people, brown people. I hate saying that, by the way, because like, do you
Yeah.
feel, I feel brown too? Like,
Oh, I think we're brown.
we're brown.
I
Yeah.
it's like I think it's black people, and then I think it's just anyone who isn't indigenous or black. I've always said we're brown,
Yeah,
right?
the rest of us are brown.
I'm like,
Yeah.
what else are we? Yeah.
I know. I mean, there's the whole question of yellow, right? Where
I think that was
the
created like there was a racial context to the
yes.
yellow. So I'm like, yeah, and I'm also not yellow. So
I know. Yeah. Oh man, the skin color thing. But I think it really brought, I know with my own white friends, when they started seeing all the reports of Asian hate crimes, I
Mhm.
think that's when they were able to really be open to white supremacy, like it was like there was really you couldn't talk your way around the fact that very vulnerable Asian people were being attacked, and are
Yeah.
still being attacked. Which, how do you feel about that? By the way, that like I feel like it, it's when I see stories on social media, I don't see stories on regular media anymore. Do you see a disconnect between what's being reported and what's actually happening, like presently?
I will say that I have boundaries with like news in general now. So like, and I'm very picky with what I read. So like like I get all my news from the community that I follow. So like for example, I think there's a bookstore, You and Me Books in New York. It's
Yes.
been there for forever. And like they like there was a fire, like kind of burnt
Yes.
down. I would never get that from mainstream news. I would get that from community. And I think that's where I focus a lot of like my attention on. I've also had to step away from reading mainstream news just because I felt like it was so triggering to my nervous system and I didn't have any ways to just like process it. I would like read something triggering, scroll, read something triggering, scroll, and like do that. But yeah, I get all my news from like the community.
Do you still feel triggered sometimes though when you see? Yeah. So what do you, and I know you work in somatic healing. Yes. It's
Yeah.
so do you, as you're scrolling, do you do some sort of processing so that you're not storing all the
Yeah.
traumatic news in your body?
Yeah, so I got into somatic healing like specifically because I didn't have any way to just process all of the rage that I've held in my body, all of the oppression, all of the arguments I've had with my partner, like all of that was just being stored in my body and I realized like if I continue to keep going at this pace, I would tell my partner I will get sick. Like I intuitively know, I don't know like of what, but I know I'm going to get sick. I came across somatic healing because this person I've been following for years, his name is Saudi Simone, was hosting like somatic activated healing like sessions, classes. You would just like dance it out, do specific movements to release tension in the body. Every single time I would do those sessions, I would just burst out crying, like just bawl my eyes out, and I would feel phenomenal afterwards. And then he was hosting like a certification to do it. So I now like truly devote my entire life to not only somatic healing, but seeing how we can heal while still acknowledging oppression, capitalism, because I'm also seeing a lot of bypassing, especially in like the spiritual social media manifestation community. And I think for us who have been reckoning with race, oppression, capitalism, which is all of us here in the West, I think it's not healing if we don't like address those things as well.
Yeah, I'm so with you on everything. And I'm just like, I have so many questions to.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's hand in hand for you.
Mhm.
The decolonizing, if we can use that word, work that you are doing, and also which is on kind of this more macro level, right? You're trying to speak to the systems that are out there. You're educating us. I guess doing you're spreading the information that we all need to know. And then on this micro level within your own body, in order for you to continue doing that work, you're like, okay, I don't want to store this, the
Mhm.
energy and the emotions that are around this in my body.
Yeah.
So it goes hand in hand, right? Like the somatic work
Yeah.
you do. And
Mhm.
you lead somatic healing sessions. Is that what you did at Nike?
Yeah, I did a somatic healing session and as far as like I feel like anyone who works with a coach or a therapist, it's so important that they have their own practice. So like I can't teach somatic healing if I'm not doing it myself because I won't be able to teach from that grounded place. And I think that's also why like the clients I work with are most of them are like burnt out social workers, therapists, nonprofit workers. So like community that, you know, community members who want to help others, but they are also burnt out and they have no practices to turn to. Um, and I feel like that's the system we live in. Like it commodifies tiredness. It commodifies our labor and it reduces us to our labor. But anyway, yeah, I have to do the practices. Otherwise, like it just won't, I won't be teaching from an embodied place.
And did you just come into that knowing just from feeling overwhelmed, like you were saying with all the scrolling and then having followed this, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. So
Oh, Saudi Simone.
Saudi Simone. So just from following this person and you just sort of like, okay, I'm going to go and try to do sessions with him. And so
Yeah.
you found the perfect practice. Did you also use therapy?
Yeah, I went
To
to therapy for a while. I went to therapy for a while, and that helped with like talk therapy is amazing because you get to intellectualize, you get to like process like what the hell is happening. I went to therapy from like what 2019. I am recently not in therapy anymore, but um I realize that there are so many different ways of healing that aren't just limited to talk therapy. Somatic healing is one of them, like EMDR. There's also, like, if you're on the spiritual side, Akashic record reading. There's so much out there. And I think now that's also what I want other like people of color, but really like Asian people to realize is that there's not just one way to listen to your intuition and heal. Yeah.
how was it finding therapy for you? Did you find the right therapist easily, or did you have to go through a few different people?
Yeah, I went through a few different people. I like to tell people if you're finding a therapist or a coach, they should like look like you or like, be queer if you're queer. Just have like as similar of a background as you as possible. When I'm shopping for a therapist, it's like for me an interview as well. Like I ask them, have you gone through these experiences or like can you teach from this place? I've asked therapists now, do you have your own practice? Because if they're burnt out, I might energetically feel it. So I'm just as critical of the therapist I work with now than, I maybe like years ago when I just wanted like therapy in general.
Do you watch that show, Never Have I Ever?
No,
Yeah, that's
I
have
haven't
you
watched
you do you
it.
know, you've heard of it, right?
I've heard of it, yeah.
It's Mindy Kaling's show, and it's based around an Indian American high schooler. It's a
Mhm.
total teeny bopper series, but I love that. It's like escapism for me. But the the main character goes to therapy. And so the therapist is kind of a recurring character, but being an Indian, she's got an Indian mother.
Mhm.
Asians kind of don't believe in therapy. There's this thing, right? Like of we don't even think mental health is a thing. I mean,
Yeah.
not us of our, not the younger generation, but like our parents certainly. But
Yeah.
anyway, there's a scene where the daughter's having like a crisis. So her mom goes to talk to her therapist for a session.
Mhm.
And the therapist is a Black woman. And she says, like, oh, I'm really happy to see you here. I never thought you'd be here, like I thought you didn't believe in therapy. And the
Mm.
mom goes, I don't believe in therapy. It's for white people.
Ah,
And there's this moment because the therapist we understand what the mother means, but the
yeah,
therapist is Black.
yeah.
So there's this moment of like, oh, wait. And then she's like, oh, I mean, certainly there's exceptions like yourself or whatever, but the idea is
Yeah,
accurate that Asian people look at therapy as something not for them.
yeah.
And I think part of it is problematic because I know from my upbringing with my Korean immigrant parents,
Mhm.
you didn't talk about mental health. Like it just wasn't that you never just that it just wasn't part of a
Yeah,
conversation, right?
yeah.
But part of it is also like therapy not being made for us. And you make a really good point about they should look like you. They should, have shared the experience that you have. And when I first was looking into finding therapy, I didn't know any of that. I just I think also when you're really struggling, you're just kind of
Yeah,
like desperate for anybody to help you, right? So
yeah.
that's kind of how I went into it, and
Mhm.
luckily found somebody that was a good match. But more recently, as I've been having these conversations, have found out that a lot of people have to go through several therapists before, or they don't even they try and then they're like, oh, therapy's not for me. And actually it's just maybe not having found the right person, right? So there's so much of that. But what made you take a break from therapy? I never know when to, because I'm like, I
Mhm.
love like that talk support. I love being able to intellectually digest and process things. But yeah, what made you take a break from it?
Yeah, and thank you for everything you said because yeah, no, it's so true. Like my parents, I never told them I went to therapy because I don't know how they would take it. Um, and it's true, like I think I'm the only person in my entire family that has ever sought like mental health help outside of praying to God. Which is really radical because my whole family's Catholic. But yeah, so I think for me, one of my biggest, not goals, but like intentions in my life is to not be in therapy forever because I want to be able to have the tools and the practices to process and release. In somatic healing, um, there's this like belief that like you can intellectualize your feelings up to a certain point, and then at what point are you ready to let it go and allow those feelings to be released from the body? And I really, really resonated with that because I would go to therapy. And this is just personally my experience, but she would ask me questions from when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I remember almost having to do mental gymnastics to be like, what happened? Oh, and then I would just get re-traumatized. Because I'm like, oh, I don't know like if I'm ready to even process this yet. And I don't even know if I should be saying it. Like, can I process feel these like this trauma without having to say it out loud and allow it to be just released from the body? And in somatic healing, it's possible. So the belief in somatic healing is that you have energetic baggage in your body. You have pain, you've been through experiences, and at the same time, you have the tools to allow you to just release that. It's like through crying, breath work. Crying is like a big one for me. It could be meditation, dance, like there's so many different things that don't that allow you to release without having to storify feelings over and over and over and over. Um, and I really like that because there was a point in therapy where I just felt like we were going through the same ish like over and over again. Um, but that's my experience because I know it's really helpful for most people. But for me, I guess this is just yeah, how I felt.
I mean, I can really relate because I taught yoga for 15 years. That was my full-time job. 10 of those years I was with Nike.
Mm.
And so long ago, like I was nearing the end of my time when Bettina came in. So I started with
Oh,
Nike in 2009. So it was
wow.
ages ago now. But I started doing yoga and somatic healing. I mean,
Yeah.
yoga is a form of somatic
Yeah.
healing. Would
Mhm.
you agree? Yeah. So I started in like when I was really young, 12, 13, just like doing
Wow.
videos at home and then taking classes at YMCA. And then when I went to college, taking classes there. And I started teaching full time quite quickly after I graduated and had never had any mental health challenges, that I was aware of anyway, like just like in my youth, right? Just in my naive youth.
Yeah.
And I think that because I went so deeply into yoga so early, that
Yeah.
there was like an energetic clearing that was
Yeah.
happening, even
Yeah.
though that wasn't why I was doing it, right? Like
Yeah.
I started doing yoga as exercise. When
Yeah.
I was a teenager, it was just as exercise. And then when I really fell in love and started teaching, it was more than exercise, but it was not like specifically for dispelling of emotional baggage.
Yeah.
I didn't have that understanding yet. It was more like, oh, I just feel better when I do yoga. I want to help other people feel better.
Yeah.
So I did that for a long time, and I had my first child, and I had really bad postpartum depression that lasted for years. And as many mothers say, my whole identity changed.
Yeah.
Um, and I was trying to fit myself back into my pre existing yoga practice.
Mm,
I was like, I used to feel good when I did yoga this way. And, and when my life was like this. So all I need to do is go back to that and then I'll feel good again. But
yeah.
it didn't work anymore. It like, it was this,
Yeah.
it was like trying to go back.
Yeah.
It was like trying to fit into clothes from like my teenage
True.
years, which like your body just changes. It just doesn't work. And so it was a really painful process for me to keep trying to beat myself into being
Mm,
like how I was before. And I actually started getting panic attacks in yoga. I'd be like
wow.
in the studio on my mat in this place that was supposed to be my like safe haven.
Yeah.
And I'd be getting panic attacks. And
Yeah.
anyway, all of this is why I eventually went to therapy and then, got to manage my symptoms,
Yeah.
came out of the depression, and I was
Good.
still teaching through all of this, but there was something that still didn't fit, and like,
Mm,
and
mm-hmm.
I didn't know what it was at the time. I was like, I felt very boxed in as a yoga teacher
Yeah.
because I would show up to class and I felt like people would expect a certain presentation, like we're going to balance on our arms and stretch our hamstrings and and we're going to talk about the beauty of life and I had gone through some like
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
crap by then, and I
Yep.
wanted to talk about like the ugly stuff and like the
Mm,
stuff you couldn't put on Instagram
yep.
but I didn't know how to do both.
Yeah.
So I walked away from teaching. This was in 2019. So 2019 was a big year for
Wow.
both of us. But
Yeah.
in 2019 I was like, I'm just going to take a break from teaching. And then with all the race reckoning, and it becoming more prevalent in normal conversation, I realized a lot of, because I had a lot of anger at the wellness world,
Huh.
kind of
Yeah.
like what you alluded to. And I realized like, oh my God, I was always a token at
Yeah.
yoga studios, even often at Nike events. Nike is in an amazing place now.
Yeah.
I see them embracing people of color, different body, different identities, but like this was like 15 years ago. It was
Yeah.
different. And like yoga studios too, just like I even go
Yeah.
back now and look at like the teacher rosters of places I taught and I'm like, it's all white people.
Yeah.
Like so much of the time it's like thin, white, beautiful blondes.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not have the understanding at the time when I was in that world to
Yeah.
identify that,
Mm-hmm.
because I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like moving through the world being like, oh, everyone's looking at me like I'm different and I'm a token. But looking back, that was the reality.
Yeah.
And so I had to go through this anger with the yoga world and the wellness world and
Yep.
being like, oh, you like will kind of let me in, but this is not designed for me.
Yeah.
I'm always going to like, if do you know the magazine Yoga Journal?
Yeah, I
It's,
do. Yeah.
it's the print is not around anymore, but I was
Mm-hmm.
recently trying to look up like the different cover models and if how many Asian,
Mm-hmm.
including Indian, which of course yoga is from India, cover models they've had. And it's like, I don't know, it's like a handful over hundreds of issues.
Yeah.
So, just this like, I felt so angry that that was the world that I had been in, that I had been, working for, dedicating all my professional life against. And I think like part of like the panic attacks coming in yoga class, I think this was part of it, being
Mm-hmm.
like, being in this, playing this game where I wasn't really welcome.
Yeah.
Um, And so seeing work that you're doing and other people that are like interested in, decolonizing yoga, decolonizing the wellness industry, that's really helped me understand like why I felt so suffocated and, part of why like I just needed to take a break. But I will say, I'm sorry, I'm like, I'm supposed to be asking you the questions that
No, I love this. I
I'm
love
talking,
this.
I'm talking at you so much, but so I went through like a few years where I kind of hated yoga.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, "Ugh, whatever. Like I don't know. Like I just was like, I don't know, yoga's, it's all about handstands and like looking good in a bikini and, just like, I'm, and I think it was like you're saying, like you had to go through with your partner. There's this like phase of like acting out the anger that has been unknowingly held in our body. And in the last couple of years, I've gone back to it and I've had those practices again. And I do my own practice. I don't take classes anymore, but that's more just for like logistics. Like it's
Yeah.
easier to get a class, like do my practice when my kids are asleep, all that stuff. But I felt that connection again, and that remembering, like my body remembering the good stuff within yoga. And it's different from the industry. The
Mm-hmm.
practice itself and like what the practice has done for my body, somatically, energetically, emotionally, even mentally, that's all pure and
Yep.
amazing, right? And but like I had to separate it from the industry.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
so true because I feel like that is the philosophy of yoga, that a lot of like wellness industries don't like say. They're like, we want it to look good. It's all about the asanas. Like it's all about just like making sure like the asanas are correct. But when you actually do yoga, it's I'm not a yoga instructor, but from what I was told, it's actually very much just about the philosophy, and about like the energy of yoga, or just like the mindset, being present, and much less about like whether you can hold a pose correctly. Um, and everything you said was just so validating for me because I feel that anger now. Like I'm very much in that phase. And yeah, I'm reckoning a lot of just like where do I fit in, because a lot of industries now, Nike is actually included in this, like Nike, Aloe Yoga, Lululemon, like they it when I entered the wellness space, not only did I see a lot of white people, it was just like this, especially as an entrepreneur, it's like, oh, I feel like I need to be backed by one of these big companies in order to feel like validated. When Nike had reached out to me to like do their events, I was just like thrilled. And I'm so grateful for Nike for this opportunity because it has helped me amplify my work. But I noticed this just wanting to be accepted, in the industry, like who's gonna take me, who do I get to be an ambassador for? And I lose the plot. I completely lose the plot because then it's like, but why are you in this space to begin with? Oh, right, Kim. Like it's to bring wellness equity to like people of color. But I think there's this like really like meticulous balance that I don't know if other people are experiencing, especially like other people of color yoga instructors, breath work, what have you, that are like, do I need to be a part of a giant corporation in order to like be seen as important in the industry? It's a lot of what I'm reckoning now. So when you said all of that, I was like, wow, like I needed to hear that today.
It is so hard. And it's like when you said meticulous balance, that is so accurately descriptive, because it's like at the end of the day, we need to feel legitimized, and our society is built on capitalism, where having a giant corporate name attached to you means a lot.
Yeah.
But then how do we protect the integrity of the work that we're doing without just, like falling into the capitalistic trap? It's so hard, but it's necessary because like you also need to pay your rent, right? Like you need to be able to pay your health. And oh my God, I like your whole the stuff that happened with you with the health, your appointments.
Yeah.
Like I was so angry for you when I saw that. But those things are a part of our reality. So how do we do the reach out to those corporates who
Mhm.
can and will help us in a way that we can't just help ourselves without disconnecting from like our soul mission, right? Like our what we're trying to do. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's what is the answer? I don't like, I guess it's really just saying like, how do we not sell out?
Yeah,
That's
literally.
like, it's basically just that.
Literally.
Like, how do we yeah, I don't, that's just, it's a really hard question.
Yeah, and I think it's like also the both. I've been like using the both and of like, yes, like I will like do the partnerships because they pay my bills. Yes, like if I really have to, I will work a 9 to 5 job. And at the same time, I'm going to make sure I have the time to pursue my passions, and I'm going to have the time to like engage with community. It's like it's not one or the other for me. It's like both and. And I think like I'm in this phase of my life right now where I am grappling with like the potential of going back to full time. I've been an entrepreneur for like since 20 since I got employed, which was 2021, and it's paid my rent and like I'm loving the journey. I'm 26, and they always say when you're in your 20s, do the things now, like do all of it, like don't like settle is what they say. So I'm trying to like live that like live, laugh, love life. But right now, as of yesterday, full moon, I've been grappling with like, should I go back to a full time? Like, should I apply to Nike to work at the corporation? And I'm grappling with, well, it could be the both and like
Yeah.
I can do the job and at the same time, like make sure I have the time to like do the things I want to do for like my soul's purpose. So
I think that's maybe, I hope, one of the positives that has come out of the pandemic and the work from home. And um, not all companies are doing this, but I feel like there has been the shift in the corporate landscape where there's just more of a leniency around. It's not just like you have to be in the office from 9 to 5. Again, this is not all companies, but I've seen it with some friends and with my husband's um, company where there's just a bit more like, let's put more trust in the person to get the work done when they need to, from where they need to, and not necessarily just bind them to like the office. And people have seen that business has carried on, right? So I hope that there's some, I think that's the thing is like, it's not that you don't want to work so-called 9 to 5. It's just that you don't want it to throw your whole life out of balance, right? You
yeah.
don't want it to just be, and that's kind of how jobs have been. It's like that's just all you do is go to work and then you come home and you're exhausted and you get up and do it again the next day and you just kind of wait for the weekend, but you're like too tired to really enjoy the weekend, and then it's like starts all over. Like that feeling sucks. Like so just figuring out how to balance the things that you want to do and you need to do. Yeah, that's tricky. I do want to ask about how much are you close with your parents still? Do you have like a good relationship?
I do have a good relationship with them now. I call them twice a week. I'm on like a self-imposed schedule. So but yeah, no, they live in Queens and I live here, but we're pretty close.
That's good. So they know the work that you do then. They
That's a great question. They know generally the work that I do is like they know I do somatic coaching. I've like explained that to them. They have no idea what that means still. They know that I do like basically like ad like graphic design for brands, which is just content creation. Um I think that my parents, very much survival mode immigrant parents, still are waiting for me to be stable. Like every time I call them, they're like, how's your job? First question they always ask me is like, how's the job? Are you saving money? Oh, when you reach 30, like it's time to get married, all of that. And I'm like,
Mm.
I'm 26 and I don't know what I'm eating for lunch like later today. So
But
yeah.
they ask you, and does it trigger you, or you're just kind of
Ah,
you? Oh, it does. Okay.
oh no, it triggers the hell out of me. And I think because I hear it so often, I've learned to notice how my body reacts whenever they ask
Mm.
me. So like my mom asks like, how's the job? How's the money or whatever? I notice my voice get like 10 octaves deeper. I'm like, it's good. Like I know I'm like, it's good. Or like I notice how I frantically try to um pick up stories about like all of the goals I'm making. Like, oh no, mom, like I made X amount of money doing this project, and like next month I'm gonna do like make this amount of money doing this project. and it triggers my nervous system because that sends me into urgency.
Mm.
So I've learned to develop practices before I call them and after I call them, which includes deep breaths, which includes making sure the house is clean when I call them. Sometimes when I'm calling them, I'm like making a smoothie or doing something else because I just can't sit and talk to them.
Mm.
I'll just notice those things.
That's really wise. That's so wise. Because like, I think a lot of people, whatever their circumstances, feel triggered by their parents, right? Like it doesn't matter, immigrant, people of color or not, like we're the whole triggered by your parents thing is like a very common theme in our lives. But and most of us know that they want the best for us. They ask you that because they're worried about you, they care about you, they want you to be okay, it's coming from a good place. And yet the feeling that it causes is
Yeah.
not good, right?
Yeah.
Like it's harmful. They're not wanting to be harmful and they're not going to change. Like you can't put it on them to change, right? You can, even if you were to say like, Mom, I don't ask me about my job, like it's not going to happen, right? So instead you're setting your expectations. What they're going to ask you. That it's coming from love. You also know that it's not going to be good for you. So you do things to kind of shield yourself. And then, yeah, I have do you have pets? I don't know if you have
Oh,
pets, but
no.
I've always had dogs, and like if they've had like an interaction with another dog, they shake.
Yeah. Mhm.
Same thing. So
Yeah.
like if something scared my dog, or whatever, like instantly she shakes.
Yeah.
And I think it's a somatic clearing.
Ah, it is. It is. We do the same thing.
Yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
animals know to do this, right?
Yeah.
Because they're so much more in tune with their physical bodies. And so I feel like I'm just imagining, just like energetically you get off the phone with your parents and then you shake.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I'll like shake. And you know what? And it's the moments where I don't want to do it the most are the moments that I know my body needs it the most. Like if I don't want to do the practice, I'm like, okay, but my body, I know my body needs it. But yeah, no, it's so true, the shaking.
Does it have to be something like, does a person have to have gone through trainings and get certified or have take class from a certified person in order to have a positive effect? Or do you think can it be as simple as like turning on like a song that really lights you up and dancing it out for 3-4 minutes after having a triggering phone call? Does that,
Yeah.
it has
Yeah.
an impact?
Yeah, so I work with Asian women, like all of my clients are Asian women, and I often tell them like you have the capacity once you learn these practices to take them into your daily life. Because one of the things in my own coaching practice is I never want a client to feel powerless or feel like they depend on me for answers. But yeah, no, shaking or just like putting on 5 minutes of your favorite playlist and dancing it out, anything to just release from the body. Like shaking is a form of stimming. So it's how people who are neurodivergent also like literally like process like triggering feelings and
Mm.
releasing it. There's something else. It's like breath work is amazing. I always tell people if you can like learn breath work, you can find them on YouTube for free. Because it's the most easy and accessible way to find that center. But yeah, I feel like once you learn the practices and can incorporate them, then you just have a somatic practice in the back of your pocket.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's a really opposite, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's very different to like nothing against chiropractors, but this is the only thing that comes to mind. But like that says you have to keep coming back to me 3 times a week, this much money in order for me to align your body. You have to keep coming back. And there's this like kind of a dependence that is asked for outside of yourself. And it's like what the wellness world and I guess medical industry too, like kind of puts on us. It's the opposite to what you're saying, which is like you don't want your the people in your life, your clients, and everybody to feel disempowered, right? You ultimately want everyone to feel empowered. And I feel like that's a message that's really missing from the wellness industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's this, because at the end of the day, it is always trying to sell something to us and telling us like we're not good enough. We could be if we just, bought this like $1,000 membership or whatever it is. So, but then how do you create longevity for yourself as a teacher and a practitioner if you, let's say, like you lead something and like these Asian women that you teach, is it something where you just count on more new clientele coming in? Like, is it something where you empower them so that they can do the practices on their own? But they can also keep coming to you for other things. Like I'm curious about the business side of it,
Yeah, no. So we have Authentically You. It's like a 3-month container. We meet once a week for 12 weeks. When I created Authentically You, it was like completely born from like the somatic healing certifications, but the activism part of it, where I would join grief circles with mostly Asian people throughout like the Stop Asian Hate era. And so many of them didn't have tools to just process their emotions. And I always say this to people who are thinking about joining Authentically You. I tell them the story, which is when I would join these grief circles, a lot of Asian women would say, hey, well, like I'm in my 40s. I have my 401k retirement set up. I have like kids, like I have a husband, I have a happy life on the surface, but I actually am deeply lost and I don't know like what my purpose is on this earth. And that would send me like, I'm like, this is a problem. And we need to address this. So Authentically You, we hold like 10 to 12 Asian women and femmes, but I split them into 2 groups. So it's like a group of 5 and a group of 5, and we each meet on 2 different days. The reason why I split them is because a lot of Asian women that I've seen when I researched this is if they were to join like a Zoom call with 50 other Asian women, and then I would ask like, tell me about your deepest pain, like not many people would speak up or feel safe to feel vulnerable. So it's split into 2 groups. We meet once a week for 12 weeks. You learn somatic practices, and we also have guest Asian practitioners, because another core pillar is making sure that we receive healing from our own community. So it's like hypnotherapy, somatic teaching, rest journey, what have you. At the end of the 3 months, I let you go. So I don't take any of you back. Like I would love to, but I don't, because I want them to feel empowered to integrate the lessons that they've learned. And if I always tell them, if you need another coach to teach you what I'm teaching, wait a little bit. Because so often, like I found in my own experience, like this dependency of thinking that someone is going to give me the answers to my life. And what I want everyone in Authentically You to know is that you have the answers, just maybe not the tools to get there. So yeah.
That just gave me chills. Yeah, that's so beautifully put. And I'm thinking of a friend of mine who's worked with coaches one-on-one, and she was telling me that she's really bummed out because after like I think it was also kind of a 3-month package situation. The coach was like selling the next thing to her.
Yeah.
And she felt like it just didn't feel good in her gut.
Yep.
She just felt like, oh, she actually just wants my business. Like she wants my money. Like, and yeah. And I think she's trying to still hold on to the good things that came from that relationship, but like, it's like something that she can no longer. And actually she's an Asian, and none of the coaches she's worked with are Asian. And we talked about that as being problematic, like, but has a hard time finding people. And how you mentioned like you have guest Asian healers that come. Do you have, is there a large community of a lot of people that are out there that you could tap into? Or is it like, are you having to reach far and wide to find these people?
I will say that, so I have my own like private Instagram like group because I knew that I wanted to be connected to Asian practitioners and like learn who they are. We all probably have the same story. I have an Instagram group chat with just Asian practitioners. And so anytime someone's like, I have an opportunity, like I need someone to go to LA or New York, it's reached out to us in that group chat. And I feel like that's like true community building when you can uplift each other in that way. But I wanted to address the concern that your friend had. I actually went through the same thing with another coach, and I actually know like a really heartbreaking story actually. So I used to know a coach that had a client, and this client lived with her parents still. And this coach, her job was to like create other coaches, basically like help them become coaches. So her client lived at her parents' house. Her goal was to make enough money from coaching to move out. But this coach would sell her products over and over and over to the point where I think she spent like $40,000. And she was never able to move out of her parents' house, which is like in the cut in Brooklyn. And I see those things happen all the time. And I think that's why coaching gets a really bad rep because people see it as like MLM. When in reality, like it's so important to like really interrogate your coach. But I will say for Authentically You, I kept that in mind when I created it. Everyone who like finishes Authentically You, you're sent to like an alumni support group, which is basically like a Discord where you get to connect with everyone. We do like free quarterly check-ins, but I will probably not work with you individually anymore. And that's like on the coach to know, like you need to know when to let your client go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you know to do that? Is it just like you, is it just something that you knew to, that you just wanted to really, I guess, like have, just believe in your program so much and like what you're giving to them so much that like, I feel like I've never heard anyone say that before, to be like, just to be like, I'm happy to be, I'm going to work with you and support you for this 3-month period and we will stay connected, but I'm not going to be like you basically, I'm not going to take your money again in the future, like, right. There's like this, and that just seems like, I don't, do other people do that? Like you do people that are,
I have no idea, but I knew I wanted that was like a huge like core pillar for me because A, like in Authentically You, we learn how to decolonize capitalism. So I always tell people like, yes, like I'm going to charge you, but like trust me, like if I could offer this for free to everyone, I would. And then I think second of all, like well I have coaching trainings that tell you as a coach like you need to know like when to send your client to a therapist, when to like let them go because you can't handle them. And I think what I've been noticing in the coaching industry is that everyone wants to become a coach, and then like I don't know what happens but like the values are kind of lost or they're doing it thinking it's going to be their full income and that's what comes first when in reality it should be your intention. Like
yeah.
you have to know why you like what is the purpose of you wanting to be a coach. Like is it to help community or is it to make a lot of money? And it can be both, but if it's unethical then it's kind of invalidates one or the other. So
I mean, I
yeah.
guess it's pretty, it just, the truth that like that example, the story that you shared for that person to have taken 40 grand from another person, that it, your bones just know that that's not okay.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's totally not in line with what you claim to be doing, which is to help that person like get up off their feet and into their own home and whatever. And you basically did the opposite to that. Oh man, I'm just conscious of our time now. I have so many questions, but I also was raised Catholic.
Oh, that's yeah, same.
Yeah. Are your parents still, are they
Yep.
practicing Catholics? Yeah, my parent, it was more my mother, but I would always say she was very Catholic. Like it was
Mhm.
everything went through the religion. And I went to Catholic high school, so I had a lot of I knew a lot of Filipino people. Actually, my best friend in
Yeah.
high school was Filipino. My first boyfriend was Filipino, just because of that like Catholic
Mhm.
connection. Um, I'm guessing you are not a practicing Catholic.
No,
Do your
no,
parents, are they accepting of that? Do you like
they
have
have
to go
no
to,
idea.
oh, they don't. So you
No,
don't,
yeah.
you when you go home and see them, you will go to church with them and stuff like
Yeah, I
that?
will go to church with them. My mom like teaches religious education on Sundays. Like she is Catholic. And I think I had a lot of like resentment and hate towards like my parents for a long time because of that. But I feel like now I've gotten to the point where I can just like see that this is what gives them like mental ease and like F it, like if that's what works for you, then that's what works for you. But there was a long time where I was like, no, I must change you. And you come to realize you can't really change your parents. So,
And the older people get, the more impossible it is
yep,
to
yeah.
change them. Oh gosh, is there anything else you want to share about? You shared a lot about your work, and is there anything upcoming that we should keep an eye on for you?
Um, yeah, I think the only thing is just authentically you four. I'm pre-launching that now. So like the approximate start date's like October. And I only open spots to like 10 people. If you wanna, learn more about it or apply, in my Instagram and TikTok, the link in my bio should be there. I vet everyone. So when you fill out the form, like you automatically do a one-on-one with me just to see how I can support you. But after that, I feel like that's all I have. And this was an amazing conversation. Like this
Oh,
made my week.
oh
So
my
thank
God. Me too. Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm just excited to share more of your personal story and all the wisdom that you have. And I just also realized I said something about like our generation, and then you're in your 20s, and I'm like, oh, I can't say I'm in her generation.
Oh my God.
But so I caught myself while I was saying it. I was like, oh, I mean, the younger than our immigrant parents generation. I hope to meet you in person sometime. I would love
Yeah.
that.
No,
Um,
likewise. I'm thinking about moving back to New York actually.
oh,
So yeah, I will definitely let you know. My mom is moving back to the Philippines.
oh
She's
wow.
retiring next year and it leaves my dad like alone in New York. We don't have any other family. So I'm just now thinking like, oh, is it time to like move back and like, I would love to live in Brooklyn. So yeah,
Well,
I will
let
see.
keep me updated, and maybe we'll be neighbors.
Yeah.
All right,
Yes.
thank you so much, Kim. I'm going to put all the links to where people can find you and everything in the show notes, and I will let you know when this is ready to go live. But thank you so much.
Thank you. And I hope
All
we
right.
stay in contact.
Yes, for sure. Bye.